I'm back with more reading pillows. These are so much fun. You can do it with or without a handle. It has a cute little pocket to hold your book. I did a reading pillow tutorial before that used a panel on the back, so you couldn't take it off to wash it. And that was the biggest request that I've had for that pattern. I now am bringing out a new pattern in my Etsy shop to do reading pillows in 4 sizes. In this video, we're going to walk through the 18 by 18 inch size, and I'm going to show you how to put a zipper hidden in the back so that you can take the pillow in and out if you ever need to wash this. The pattern will also include directions with photos for how to do this envelope. So it opens like that and you just pull that out. So that will be included there as well. So without further explanation, let's get sewing. Before I get into all the fabric pieces that we need, I want to show you on a finished pillow because it's going to make a lot more sense. And in the written directions that you can get in my Etsy shop, it's all labeled. And then there are also charts that show you all the sizes and your 2 back options. So this is a completed reading pillow. It has one big square, which is this white, then a pocket, which is going to have fabric on both sides. I like to put this fabric on the top because it just makes the top where you're putting your book in and out a lot stronger than if we had just sewn these 2 pieces of fabric together. So I think having that, it's pretty and it is also useful. The handle is totally optional. If you want to just be able to hang it up or carry it around like that, you can do that or you can skip it. So those are the pieces for the front. Then the back, there's 2 different ways that this can be done that are in the pattern you can get on Etsy. This one is an envelope back, basically 2 pieces of fabric that overlap, and then you can pull the pillow in and out like that. This is the best for beginners, quick and easy, and just a little bit of a different look. In this video, I'm going to show you how to do a zipper back, and that is what this is going to look like. So we're going to have 2 pieces of fabric. We're going to have this little strip of fabric that overlaps and hides the zipper. So it's just a different finish, a different look and feel, and it's a good way to practice zippers. So now that I've shown you on a pillow, let's look at all of the pieces involved. Okay, so these are the pieces that we need for the front. This is the handle fabric, which is 8 inches wide by 4 or 5 inches. Then you have your square. I like to do my squares a 1/2 inch larger than the size of my pillow. A lot of people will do the same size, but I feel it is a little bit too tight once you do your seam allowances and have to shove everything in there. So I like to give my covers a little bit more grace. We're doing the 18-inch pillow. This is 18.5-inch square. And I've already adhered fusible fleece to the back. I use the Pellon 987F. And you just follow their directions and you're going to cover the entire back with that. It gives it a little bit more body and shape. So this is going to be like this section. It will be covered by the pocket. Then for the pocket, you need 2 pieces of fabric. This one is going to be 18.5 inches wide, 11.5 inches tall. I put the fusible fleece on the back of that already as well. And then I just need a fabric for the inside. You're not going to see this, so you can use anything. Use what you have left for the inside of your pocket. And then I have already pressed this because I made another pillow and used this same trim. So this is the piece that is going to go over the edge of the pocket like this to give it that extra stability. And for the 18-inch reading pillow, this is cut to 2 inches wide by 18.5. You'll notice it's longer than 18.5 inches because I just took a width of fabric and used it for 2 different pillows. So if you have a scrap of fabric that you want to use there and it's longer, I would sew it onto the pocket before cutting it to size. That's just how I like to do it. So those are the fabrics for the front. Now let's talk about the back. Here we're going to have 2 different pieces, and then you want a zipper that is at least 1 inch or 2 wider than your fabric. Especially if you're not used to using zippers a lot, this is just going to be a lot easier. Now, normally I would use a zipper like this, where you're going to see it. It's not an invisible zipper and it usually has a metal clasp, but I didn't have one long enough in this style, but I did have one long enough in this invisible zipper style. So I'm going to be using this even though I really don't care if it's invisible because it's going to have the flap over it. But the size is right and I had it in my stash, so it's definitely what I want to use. Then I have this piece of fabric that is 2.5 inches, and this is going to be the flap that is going to come down and cover the zipper. All of these I have cut to 19.5 inches wide, an inch wider than the front of the cover, and then it's going to need to be when we're sewing the front to the back. And that is because sometimes when you put the zipper in, things might shift a teeny bit. Sometimes things don't work out perfectly. So I prefer, especially for this, to make it a little bit oversized and then cut it to the perfect size instead of starting with all of these the perfect width and having them not be perfect and then your pillow's not as good. So that is how I will be doing this project. And then we have a piece of fabric that is 3 inches by 4 inches, and that is going to be to make the little tabs on the zipper so that the zipper isn't going all the way in to the seam allowance. It makes sewing the pillow together a lot better. Okay, so those are all of the fabrics. And again, in the written pattern, you'll get charts to do all 4 sizes, 12 by 12, 16 by 16, 18 by 18, or 20 by 20. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take the inside fabric for the pocket. I'm going to put it right side down, and then the outside, the side we're going to see on the pillow, right side up. The fleece, again, is already fused onto this fabric. So we're just going to line these 2 fabrics up, making sure that top edge is lined up the best, because our next step is going to be to sew this on top. You can use clips or pins. I like to use clips whenever possible. Let me know in the comments if you're a clip or a pin person. You're just going to line the raw edges of these 2 fabrics up with the inside fold of this. And because my fabric is a little too long and that is a selvage, I want to make sure that is off the end and will get cut off. So I'm just going to be clipping that together. Now we're going to make our handle, and I'm using an 8 inches by 4 inches. Sometimes I use a 5-inch high for this large of a pillow, but because I already had a piece that was 4 inches, we're going to go with that. So I'm going to turn it wrong side up. I'm going to fold it in half and press. I'm going to use my quilter's clapper, which if you're not familiar with it, it's one of my favorite things. It is an unfinished piece of hardwood. It absorbs the heat and it helps that fold become crisper. It also helps the fabric not be as hot to the touch. Then I'm going to open it up and I'm going to fold each raw edge right into that fold line that we made. And I'm going to press, but not press on that fold line because we're going to want that again. So what we're doing is we're basically making a 4-layer handle. So there's going to be enough fabric that it's going to have some stability. If you want it to be even stiffer, you could put some lightweight interfacing in there. And it is also going to be encapsulating these raw edges inside, because when we fold that back in half, you're never going to see those raw edges again. Just press that. And then I usually just put a clip on it, clip or 2 just to hold it closed. And what we're going to do is we're going to take this to the sewing machine. We're going to sew down this side to sew those together, up this side and then down the middle, because that will just give it nice shape and keep it in a good form for the handle. Now to sew the handle, because we are sewing off a raw edge that will be inside the seam, I'm going to use a leader fabric and not pull my bobbin thread up. So this is basically just a little scrap of fabric, and I'm going to start sewing on that, because then if any of the thread gets pulled under and there's a little bird's nest, it's going to be on this scrap fabric and not on our project. And you want to make sure you go back and forth when you get onto your project, because it needs to be knotted even though you started on the leader fabric. Then I'm just going to cut that leader fabric off. You don't have it connected to your project in any way, and then we can use that again. Now just to save thread, and I won't have to start and stop again, I'm going to leave that there, and then I'm just going to start right onto this fabric. And once I get to where it's sewing onto the pocket, I'm going to make sure I go forward and back a few stitches to secure. And then I'm just going to cut these so that they're even with the fabric, and also cut the handle off. Now we're going to baste the handle. And again, remember that the handle is totally optional. If you don't want one, you don't need to. So I'm going to fold my A square, which is the front of the pillow, my 18.5-inch square. I'm going to put my center right on an inch line on my mat. Then we're going to be putting the raw edges 1 inch to each side. So the inside of the handle is 1 inch away. So see, there's 2 inches in between these handles. And take a clip that right there, just so that it stays in place when we put the back to the front. I'm also going to fold and pin this down so that it's not going to make a huge lump when we put the front to the back. And then we're going to attach the pocket. I just take the pocket, make sure I have the front. That's our inside of the pocket. We're going to line up these sides and the bottom. Make sure this is nice and flat. And I'm going to clip that together. We're going to sew the pocket to the back of the pillow with a 1/4 inch seam. And we can do a 1/4 inch seam because when we sew the back to the front, we're going to be using a 1/2 inch seam. So you won't see any of that stitching. I'm going to work on the zipper tabs, which are going to help the zipper go into the back. And I originally showed you this, which was 3 inches by 4 inches, but that is actually incorrect. We want it to be 4 inches by 3 inches. Now, if you're using non-directional fabric, it doesn't matter at all. It's going to be hidden, so it doesn't totally matter at all. But if we kept it this way, all our flowers would be sideways on the edge of the zipper. So I just cut a new piece. So all we need to do right now is put this wrong side up and fold this over about a 1/4 inch and press. Now we're going to work on the zipper and putting fabric tabs on either end, the length that we need them. And if you don't have zipper love, hopefully I can help you with that. It's not as difficult as a lot of people make it out to be. So the first thing we're going to do, we're going to cut this in half. So we have two 2-inch wide by, I guess, 2 3/4 now that we have folded that down. So it's going to be 1 for each end. If you're using a zipper like this, which as I said, I normally would, but I didn't have the right length, it might have a metal end on it. Now, you can leave that, but I will tell you when I used it, I mistakenly hit that with my needle. My machine made an awful noise, broke the needle, could have messed up my machine. So now I'm never leaving those on again. What I would do is zigzag across the teeth and then cut that off. This is basically a stopper so that when you do the zipper, it stops and it doesn't come right off of the fabric. We are going to be working with this zipper, which is actually an invisible zipper that's designed to not show even without doing the little flap thing. Like this is the kind that is often put on the bottom of a pillow. And this one doesn't have metal on the end. It just stops, like it's not pulling apart. So we don't have to worry about that zigzag part. So that's one beautiful thing. So what we're going to do is we're going to put our zipper right side up. So when you look at your zipper, this would be the right side of this type of zipper, and this is the right side of an invisible zipper. So an invisible zipper, you see the teeth. When it's the wrong side, you just see fabric and the line when it is the right side up. So we're going to have this right side up. Then we're going to put one of these fabrics wrong side up, so basically right sides together, and we're going to put that centered on our zipper. Now we're going to keep those in place. I'm going to turn this over. So we're going to fold the pressed side first over the zipper and just have it lined up. You don't want it pulling, you just want it lined right up with the fabric tape, they call this, of the zipper. And then we're going to fold the other side, which is just the raw cut edge. You definitely want this first because when we then flip it, this will be on top. And we want the folded edge on top, not the raw edge. So we're just going to do that. And then I'm just going to grab a clip and I'm going to clip that. Now we're going to go to the sewing machine and we're going to stitch a 1/4 inch from this edge just straight across. So we have this G fabric sewn on this edge. This was the easy one. We're just going to flip that forward. It doesn't matter that these are separated because that will be held together when it is in the seam. And we're going to keep our zipper upside down. Now, in the directions on my Etsy shop, I said to take the width of your A fabric, and that is your big square that is the front of your pillow. And just mark the width on here, either with clips or tape. But now that I'm doing a video, I'm like, why don't we just use the actual A fabric? way easier to judge by. So I'm putting this fabric right on my mat, and we're going to use this as a guide. Now, mind you, we're using the big square from the front, and we are not using these rectangles that we're actually going to sew this onto because this is wider. We're going to cut it to this size once we get the zipper on there. So we need to gauge where these go based on this size. That's super important. Another rookie mistake that we've all made at some point is you're like, okay, I have a tab over here. I need to put a tab over here. And you put it and you fold it and you sew it. And then you realize my zipper pull is not in the center where it needs to be. So the next step, we need to open this. So make sure you have pulled this, I don't know, 4 or 5 inches down. We're going to place this sewn edge 3/4 of an inch to an inch, you can fudge that, from the edge on this side. Now, the one thing that's tricky when you have your zipper open and you're sewing things, you have to make sure that these teeth stay lined up so the zipper is going to work. So if it's, pushed like that, it's not going to close. So it's really important that we hold this together and we make sure that stays where it needs to be. We're going to be putting this edge 1/2 inch from this edge. So I'm going to put this here where it's going to go. And then you can either use a pin or I am going to use painter's tape because it's not going to leave any residue on the zipper, but it's going to hold that together more securely than using a pin because this would slide on the edge of the pin. So we're just going to do it this way. Now, because we have this upside down, this is going to be, we need it right sides together. So we're going to put our fabric face up, our zipper face down, make sure this edge is about 1/2 inch. Double check that this edge is 3/4 of an inch from this end. And then we're going to do the same thing that we did on this one. We're going to fold the side we pressed first. And then we are going to fold the cut edge this way. Then we are going to put a little clip and we are going to sew 1/4 inch from this edge. Now it's really important to double check that your tape is outside and it is not under here. You're not going to be sewing on your tape. Make sure your zipper pull is in between these two things before you sew. Otherwise, you're going to have to pull that out. But we have checked. Zipper's in the right place. Tape is in the right place. This is in the right place. Let's go sew that seam. We can take our tape off and then we're just going to pull that forward just like we did with the other side. The raw edge should be under, the folded edge on top. Perfect, perfect. The zipper's in the center and look at that. It is 3/4 of an inch from each side of this. We did a great job. Now we don't need this anymore right now. Next, it is time to attach the zipper to these pieces. So the bottom and the top. And then also we're going to attach it so that this piece is going to be folded in half and come down and hide it. So it just looks like a cute little flowers in the middle of the covered bridges. So I'm going to put it on the smaller piece first. You can do either way. I like to visually make sure everything is lined up correctly. Front of the fabric, front of the fabric, front of the zipper. And then I just flip the zipper down to make sure we have right sides together. The right side of the zipper to the right side of the fabric. Then we are going to center this onto this fabric. So looking at these edges, get them pretty centered. And then we're going to be lining up the edge of the fabric and the edge of the fabric tape. Now you can use pins, you can use clips. I'm also going to link to a video that shows you a couple other ways to do this to make this nice and easy. If you are new to zippers, I would recommend you take a look at that video. I show you how to use a glue stick or how to use fusible tape to really hold this in place. But I'm just going to use the clips. So we're just lining up these raw edges. So we're going to be using a zipper foot on our sewing machine. They freak people out a little bit more than they need to, but it's basically a very nicely sized foot so that you are sewing as evenly close to these zippers. Now, the trick to a quality zipper installation, it sounds fancier when you call it that, is to not sew past this. Now, if you have your zipper foot going past the zipper pull, it's going to move a little bit. And then when you turn it, it's going to have like this little wavy section. So I'll show you this when we're sewing, but I just want to explain it when you can see this a little better. We're going to sew We're going to stop about here, about 1 inch from this. We're going to keep our needle down. We're going to lift the foot, and then we're going to do this, and we're going to move the zipper behind the foot. That way, you're going to have a nice, even seam. Now, if you're new to sewing zippers or don't sew them often, make sure you refer to your sewing machine instruction manual or look it up online, because everyone's going to work a teeny bit different. The basics are going to be the same, but some things might vary. For example, when I start sewing, mine automatically goes forward and backwards, and some may or may not. And I am using a walking zipper foot. I like any kind of foot that I can get that walks. I'm down for it. So I have my zipper foot on, and I have the needle, so you can see it, set to the left. So I'm going to have the right side of the foot lined up with the right edge of the zipper tape and the fabric, and then the left placed needle will go next to the zipper teeth. It can also be shifted so that the needle is on this side if I wanted to sew down this side of the zipper. So because I didn't glue or tack this down in any way, I'm just going to move slowly and make sure everything stays lined up as I go. And I'm going to show you when and where to stop to move the zipper pull so that everything stays straight and you don't get a weird wobble. So I like to stop about 1 inch before, keep the needle down, lift your foot, and then just flip that up a little bit. And we're going to grab that zipper pull and we're going to move it until it is well behind where we're sewing. Then I'm going to make sure everything stays lined up again, put the foot down and keep on going. Now when I get up here, it's a little bit thicker, so I like to hold it down with my scissors. I feel like this foot, you're most likely to put the needle through your finger because there's really not a lot stopping you. So make sure you're using scissors or something else so that you're not too close to that needle. Now that our zipper is on, we're going to be pressing it forward, but first I'm just going to press right along that stitching just to flatten it. You can see it's a little wobbly, so we're going to set that seam. And I'm just pressing to the side of the zipper. All right, that's flatter. And hit it with my tailor's clapper. Tailor's clapper is basically the same thing as a quilter's clapper, but longer. Now I'm going to turn it over, push that forward, and press the fabric so it is away from the zipper. Now I'm just going to run back to the sewing machine and just do a quick top stitch really close to the edge just to hold the fabric and that zipper tape down nicely. So to top stitch, if I wanted to have the zipper on the right hand side, I would move this needle so that it went to the right, or I could simply turn this around and sew this way and I don't have to move my needle. I'm going to just do that. And I'm going to sew with the left side of the foot on the left side of this fold so that our stitching is going to be nice and close. And just like before, you don't want to sew right past this zipper pull, so I'm going to lift the foot, put that well behind where we've already sewn, put the foot down and finish up. So now that is pressed, we have a nice top stitch. It's all well secured. So now we need to get the top part of the back onto this. The first step is to take our rectangle and fold it and press it in half, wrong sides together. So this is going to be the flap that's just going to be cute on the back and cover that zipper. And just like the last time, you want to have your zipper open a little bit, and we're going to do the same thing where we move it as we sew to that area. You're going to be having to feel for it this time because you won't see it as you're sewing, because we're going to have all of this over top. Going to line up the edges with the edges of this fabric, and you'll see this is a little bit longer because this must have kind of pulled a little bit, and that's why we made it a little bit oversized. So just center this and match the raw edge with the edge of the zipper tape. Then we are going to take the top of the back, and just like when I put the zipper, I like to visually make sure it is right side up, because the last thing we want to do is sew it together and realize that they're upside down. So if you're using non-directional, it doesn't matter. But I am using directional fabric, obviously, so I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to flip it forward. That way I know that when I press it, it will be in the correct direction. And I'm just going to add this to the sandwich, lining up these sides and these raw edges. So up here, not only do we have the zipper tape and a fabric, we also have the 2 layers of this flap. So I'm just going to clip this together really well, and then we're just going to sew that the same way we sewed the other. There's just going to be a little bit more fabric there. So I'm going to do more clipping since I'm not gluing this. And you can also use pins, of course. As I do all this clipping, I'm going to mention that if you like these videos, if you like doing easy sewing tutorials, sewing tips, tricks, and techniques, and beginner quilting, I hope you have subscribed to my channel. Hit that bell so that YouTube will notify you when I post a new video. All right, so we're going to go back to the sewing machine and sew that on. Now, just like with the other side, I'm going to have the right side of my zipper foot lined up with these raw edges. I'm going to be paying close attention to make sure everything stays together, and my needle is to the left and it will go right next to that zipper. Now, as I'm sewing, I'm feeling down here to make sure I find that zipper pull, which is right there. So I'm going to take a few more stitches, needle down, lift the foot. I'm going to pull this all back so I can find that zipper pull, and then I'm going to close the zipper well past where we've already sewn. That is going to avoid that little bubble bump that you might get and that often turns people off from zippers forever. Just like with the other one, I'm just going to press over that seam, make sure everything is nice and flat. And then I'm going to push the top away, but leave this flap down across the zipper and press. So now when I go to do my top stitching, it's going to be here. It's actually going to still be on that zipper tape, but we're not going to be seeing the zipper as we work, again, because of this little flap. Now I'm feeling my zipper pull right here, so I'm going to get to about 1 inch from that. Crap. I'm going to lift my foot, pull that back, move the pull, my foot down, and keep going. All right, so that top stitching is all done. We are so close, I can taste it. Now, this is the back with our little flap for our zipper, and this is the front, and you'll notice that the front is bigger than the back, and we knew that was going to happen, and it was very purposeful. So what we are going to do is we are going to put these right sides together with the front on top, and we're going to center them. Now, if they're not quite straight, like this is a little smaller here than up here, you just want to make sure this line parallel with like the top and bottom of the pillow so that it doesn't look crooked on the back. I always use zippers that have plastic teeth so that you can cut through them. You can either cut through them with scissors, but because we have to cut all of this too, we're going to be using the rotary blade, which probably means it's the last time you're going to use this rotary blade because it might dull it a little bit. So now I'm just going to cut the back the same exact size as the front. And I'm just carefully shifting that around so that nothing moves. I want these two pieces of fabric to stay together in the same way, but move it so that I can cut. The next step is to clip or pin all the way around the pillow because we're going to turn it right side out through the zipper, which you need to leave open so that we can do that. So make sure you have left that open. And I can tell where the top is because I can see the pin where my handle was. And I have a whole system with my clips for how I do this. So I'll take a different color, like I'm going to take the red, and I'm going to clip that everywhere that I want to double back for extra reinforcement. So I'm clipping it where those handles meet. I'm clipping it at the top edge of the pocket. And actually, I guess that's the only places. If you do an envelope back, there's more places you want to double back than there are for this style. So I'm just going to do red there, and then I'm just going to throw other colors, and we're going to sew all the way around with a 1/2 inch seam, which is really weird to me because I would say 95% of the time I'm using a 1/4 inch seam. All right, so that's well clipped all the way around. Head to the sewing machine. Now we're going to be sewing with a 1/2 inch seam, and so I want to talk about a couple ways to do that. First, obviously, is to just look at the markings on your sewing machine and use that as a guide. My 1/2 inch is right along the edge of my feed dogs, and then this little white line here, but there's no line here. I find it kind of hard to follow, especially since I usually do a 1/4 inch and I just use the edge of my foot. So when I have the odd thing that has a different seam, I like to mark it. So the first way you can do that is with a seam guide ruler, and this has all the different measurements, and I'll put a link to another video that shows you in more detail how to do this. But I'm going to put this under here, and I'm going to use the hand wheel so that my needle's moving really slowly. And I'm going to get it to go into the hole where it says 1/2 inch. Then I'm going to make sure it is straight because, obviously you can make it really crooked with that needle in there. But I'm going to make sure it is straight with all those guidelines. And then I'm going to put the foot down to hold it in place. Then I'm going to grab a magnetic seam guide. And I bought these together. I'll put a link in the video description. This is from Madame Sew. And so this is a pretty strong magnet and it'll just boom right there. Now, one bummer is because I have a top loading bobbin, I can't change my bobbin if I have this up here. But it makes a nice big guide to just run the fabric by. This would just go and I would just be watching and having it go right along that edge, nice and easy. Another way is to use a low tack tape, like a washi tape. A lot of people that use physical planners use this, or scrapbooking or card making, or painter's tape. So to do that, you can take any of your quilting rulers and you're just going to line it up along these guidelines, make sure that needle would be about that 1/2 inch, and then move your hands away and let that sit. Then you would just take some tape and you would put it just to the side. So now I have a really long guide that I can use. And because it is a low tack tape, it is not going to leave any residue on my sewing machine or anything like that. You can do the same thing with painter's tape. And now I'm going to sew all the way around with a 1/2 inch seam, doubling back to reinforce everywhere there is a red clip. So I'm just going to randomly start here and we're going to let her rip. Now the other thing, because I don't use 1/2 inch seams very often, I find it harder to know exactly where to stop when I get to the end. With the 1/4 inch, with my 1/4 inch foot, it has a little line that I look at, and like I said, I'm just used to it. So this is a way to fix that if you want to, or if you're new. I also, when I taught my niece how to sew, she really liked doing this. Just put your ruler and make a mark. You can use a pencil. This is a heat erasable pen. When my needle gets there, it is time to stop and pivot. So if you're a reader and you're going to be using this book for yourself, I would love to know what kinds of things you like to read. And if you have any book recommendations that you think I should check out, just leave me a comment and let me know. We're right back to where we started. So all of our sewing is done. All right, I flipped my mat over to the black side so we can see a little bit better what's going on. The next step is to clip our corners, and I usually just put it right over my trash can. A lot of people will do a corner at a 45-degree angle like that, but then you still have quite a bit of fabric that needs to fold into that corner. So I find it better to come and do 2 cuts, so come down at more of an angle. Always, of course, making sure you're not clipping any of those stitches. But this way, there's a lot less right in that point, so you're more likely to get a better point turn. Now these are a lot thicker, and you'll see I am cutting through some stitching here. That's just where we attach the pocket to the front of the pillow in the first place. It's this inner stitching that you need to make sure you don't cut, because that's what sewed the back to the front and is holding that pocket as well. So it's fine to cut through that first stitching, just do not hit that second stitching. Now, we left our zipper open, that's good, so that we can turn it. I usually open it all the way. So I have a nice big spot, but let's remember that there is a pin here holding that handle down. I may have poked myself more than once. So if I ever have things pinned down, I try and remove that pin before I really get into doing that turn. So I got the pin out, and now we're just going to turn this right side out and push those corners out. Here's something to watch. I was getting overzealous with my turning, and I was like, wait a minute, did I sew this together wrong? Because I'm seeing the inside of my pocket. And that's just because I turned too much. So just make sure when you're turning it right side out, you're just turning the back from the front. So you want your hand to be in here by the fusible fleece, not inside your pocket. And then it pops up a little funny just because you have this 1/2 inch. So I usually just press that down with my hands. Not that it's going to be flat because we're putting a pillow in here in a second, but look how cute. Now let me get my pillow. And I like to cut these off. Those warnings you have to sell. If you're selling your pillows, you have to leave this on. If it's for personal use, you can cut that off. And then you're just going to put your pillow in here, push the corners into the corners, kind of move it around so it's fluffed the way you want it. And then when you're happy with it, you just zip it up. So now all we need is a book. So let's review really quick our 4 sizes. That is our 20-inch, huge, our 18-inch, 16-inch is the most common, it's the easiest to find, and our 12-inch. That is how you do it. And if you want to get the written pattern with all of the sizes and measurements and written directions for how this goes together that supports this video, you can find it in my Etsy shop, and it will be linked in the video description as well as on the video. Happy sewing and happy reading.